of energy in ways that produce sustainable solutions to the climate crisis. It attempts to address energy poverty, resisting the degradation of land and people, and in its work, responds to attacks on workers' rights and protections. TUED was established in 2012 and works with trade unions, labor federations, social movements, policy organizations from both the North and South. But in 2012, TUED launched the TUED South, which was trade unions of the South working to advance a public pathway to a just energy transition. And what does TUED mean by the public pathway? It's fighting for an energy transition that does not increase debt and poverty. These quarterly meetings are part of TUED's work in organizing unions on a common platform regionally. We know this is a difficult time of the year for trade unions who are trying to complete meetings, but we appreciate your participation and hopefully post the meeting, we'll find ways to work together and support each other. We've got speakers lined up who will be given 10 minutes each and will speak to us on different aspects that affect our work in the continent. The first speaker will be Comrade Daniel Obego. He's the Regional Secretary for Africa and Arab countries of the Public Service International that we call PSI. And he's going to speak to us about anti-privatization struggles. Comrade Daniel, you have 10 minutes. You won't mind if I interrupt you when you're into 9 minutes, and then we can pick up the other issues in discussion. Over to you, Comrade Daniel.
Thank you very much, Suraya, and thanks to everyone. Let me appreciate the work of TUED and also working together with our comrades in ITC Africa, PSI, and I see my comrade Sandra and some of our comrades, union leaders in the meeting. We appreciate you very much. I want to especially appreciate the TUED team, Sean, Irene, Surya, and the rest of the team for putting up this wonderful work, but also putting a lot of effort into ensuring that the TUED South remains relevant, especially within the context of the struggles and the crisis of climate and the just transition in the region. I also want to appreciate the PSI team that are working tirelessly around the issues of climate and the just transition, who have been working to put together all these wonderful examples for us to learn from, but also give us the opportunity to make strong positions and strong policy recommendations through various platforms. I also want to appreciate the various general secretaries, deputy general secretaries, chairpersons, local union organizers, union staff, researchers who are also in this meeting. We do not take your presence and your participation for granted. I also want to appreciate the various speakers that are on this team, and I recognize all of you. Just a quick one, just like Surya introduced TUED. So PSI, globally, we are made up of union workers or public service workers of 30 million. But at the regional level, we are over 1 million members. We are scattered in about 50 countries. We find ourselves, or we find our workers in the areas of education, energy and utilities, health, national administration, and education. And I believe that it is actually one of the reasons why we have taken keen interest in this campaign, especially positioning ourselves and demanding a public pathway to the just transition. I think we gather here today, comrades, not merely to discuss issues around energy and energy poverty or Mission 300, but it's also an important moment for us to confront the crisis of justice, which is informed by the need for working people, citizens, communities seeking a life of dignity. For us as PSI and as public sector workers, access to energy is not just a luxury. It is a fundamental access to quality education, healthcare, economic opportunities, productivity at the workplace, and the right to life. We believe that these aspirations must be a national development agenda, which should be driven by the public and not private, profit-driven interests. And I believe, comrades, that it is our duty as trade union organizations and activists and trade union workers to fight for this. And I believe that is why we have gathered here. Across our region, the push for various interest groups to privatize energy and the energy systems have scaled up. And I believe this is happening when we all know that privatization of energy systems has failed. It has failed to deliver universal access. It has failed to invest in communities, and it has failed to respect workers. There are many examples scattered all over the region that we can draw from Uganda to Nigeria to Ghana and to other parts of the region where these processes have failed on all fronts. I must also say that it has failed to treat energy as a public right that it is, yes. I remember, early part of this year when we got hints of the recent attempt by the government of Ghana to bring back privatization of electricity, i.e. the ECG, through a process called private sector participation. And all of us know and understand that this is a morphed PPP or a morphed privatization. We try to reach out to our comrades within the research units of PSI to provide technical assistance to our affiliates in Ghana, the Public Utility Workers Union. Now, the paper provided a number of outcomes, and I would like to mention just three of them. The first outcome suggests that investment of independent power producers in the energy sector are highly profitable, which is also secured by take-or-pay contracts with the Ghanaian government. So the independent power producers scattered all over the region in the energy sector, of course, they declare or they assume that they are just participating as independent energy power producers. Most of the time, in the heat of the moment, we fail to understand that these are also private interests who has only one thing as a focus, and that focus is to make profit. One other item that we also fail to really interrogate is the take-or-pay programs or take-or-pay policies attached to these power producers and the contracts with government, and which makes most of our government, especially with the example from Ghana, incurs a lot of debt because of this particular program. It also shows that, contrary to claims that privatization attracts much needed private capital, it finds out that this argument is also misleading. Many so-called private sector investment in Ghana's power sector are actually financed through loans and credit facilities from international development institutions such as the British International Investment, FMO of the Netherlands, the World Bank, the National Monetary Fund, the IMF, Proparco, and the US International Development Finance Corporation. So one will ask, if our government can guarantee these loans for these private enterprises, why not guarantee these loans for state-owned institutions running the energy sector? If government can let go and let alone these private entities to function in the energy sector and make enormous profit, why won't they allow our state-run institutions to be independent, devoid of political interference, so that they can run the institutions to serve the interests of the public? I believe that this is very possible. Now, the report also suggests that the failures of electricity privatization is clear in a country like Uganda. It's clear in a country like Nigeria. It is clear in a country like Britain. It is clear in Pakistan and clear, especially if you follow the recent developments in Ghana. Comrades, I think that we have watched the privatization of energy and electricity in our various countries, especially countries that I've listed here, fail. And the failure has inured to the benefit of private interests, has inured to the benefit of entities whose aim and sole responsibility in that sector is to extract, and extract. As PSI, we stand firmly for a pathway to a just transition, one that centers workers, communities, and climate justice, one that recognizes energy as a public service. And like I reiterated from the beginning, it is linked to quality education, it is linked to quality healthcare, it is linked to the quality service we receive from local and regional governments, it is linked to all the social services and all the programs of public service and government in our various countries. We also stand firmly to say that it is never and will not be a private commodity. It is one that builds through resilience, through democracy, or the democratic ownership of the sector, transparency, and equity. Comrades, I believe that our gathering here provides us an opportunity as trade union workers in the global south to rethink our position and rethink our stance and our various recommendations as far as the energy sector is concerned. We are at a moment where we need to pay attention to the geopolitical crisis in the world. We need to pay attention to the fact that an economic system that promised prosperity for all, that promised wealth for all, has failed, and has failed woefully. But I must say that it has benefited just a small number of people in the world. And so as unions and people of the region, whilst we advocate for a public pathway to the energy transition, whilst we advocate against austerity, whilst we advocate against privatization of public services, including against privatization of energy, whilst we advocate for debt reliefs, whilst we advocate that countries should not be punished because they owe, whilst we call for an end to illicit financial flows, I think we must sit and ask our questions. That is this the kind of economy we want to find ourselves in? Do we want to remain at the fringes and become beneficiaries of the outcomes of a neoliberal system that has failed and that has not inured to our benefits? If we have responses to these questions, my last request to all of us is that there is a moment, and this is the moment, an opportunity for us to come together and rethink the economy we are running. And maybe, just maybe, ask ourselves or tell ourselves we want to redefine the kind of economy we are running in our own terms, within our own context. I believe that this particular meeting will provide us the opportunity to also look into all these things. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thank you, Comrade Daniel. That you covered various areas from political economy to the energy struggle and privatization in Ghana and other countries. I think we will pick up some of the issues you raise in discussion. I want to, because of time, I want to move straight to Comrade Rhoda. Comrade Rhoda is a policy officer of climate change and environment in ITUC Africa. She has recently herself hosted a meeting in Dar es Salaam where concepts of restore and reclaim were asserted by the meeting and raised as decisions in the declaration. Comrade Rhoda is busy with preparations for COP, but has taken time out to join us. We're hoping, Comrade Rhoda, you'll reflect a bit on the Dar es Salaam meeting and your preps as you move forward in your work. hand over to you, hopefully 10 minutes, and then we can pick up the balance of the issues in discussion. Thanks, Comrade Rhoda.
Thank you very much, Soraya, and thank you to everyone who has joined us this afternoon from various parts of the continent. We are delighted to have you join this important webinar, which is first of all supposed to be informative, build our capacities on some of the pertinent issues around energy transition on the continent, but then also provide a space for us to engage and also share, update ourselves on what is happening specifically within our countries. And so from my end, from the level of ITUC Africa, as Soraya mentioned, we recently co-convened a meeting with TUED as well as other policy allies in Dar es Salaam in August. And I want to think that most of you here present in this meeting today were present in the Dar es Salaam meeting, which essentially brought together a little over 80 participants. It was indeed one of our milestone or historic meetings because it provided a space for us to interface and exchange with other policy allies, which is oftentimes not what we do. This was a very deliberate attempt to bring in external voices. First of all, for us to engage with them, for them to also begin to understand some of the issues we are pushing forward, but then also for us to forge an alliance, for us to build a more unified front in advancing the just transition on the continent. I want to also specify that this meeting also reached out to government officials. Unfortunately, we didn't have too many, but we had a representative from the Nigerian government that also actually shared how alliances can actually also help in moving forward, or how social dialogue can actually help in moving forward the work around transition and energy transition generally, because this representative also shared how they have been working together with the trade unions in Nigeria. And we know that the Nigerian trade union movement is actually one of the affiliates that have made tremendous progress in the work on transition, just transition and energy transition in general. And so this meeting left with a declaration, which I will be sharing with you shortly. I'll be sharing the highlights of the declaration with you. But I also want to note that the meeting was also provided opportunity for trade unions for the first time to engage the African Group of Negotiators. For the benefit of all, the African Group of Negotiators are the representative of governments who are actually responsible for negotiating climate policy decisions at the global level, specifically within the UNFCCC processes. And so these people are very key and critical when it comes to the decisions that come out from COP. And as ITUC Africa, we thought it was very pertinent as we're preparing and moving towards Belém to engage the AGN to first of all share with them what our demands are, but then most importantly also for them to begin to understand our issues a bit more. Because what we have realized over the last few years is that the AGN actually are quite distanced when it comes to the questions around labor rights, issues around social protection, social dialogue, and we thought that it was important for us to begin engaging them strategically. And so this meeting was also very good because it gave us that opportunity. And at least for now, we can boldly say that there is some familiarity where we can continue to advocate and engage the AGN more strategically. So coming out of Dar es Salaam, representatives from the meeting, which essentially came from the trade union, the African trade union movements, as well as the global union federations, from the various sectors, including public sector, the public services sector, the mining, energy sector, the transport sector, agriculture sector, etc., convened in Dar es Salaam for a 3-day meeting around the theme New Energy for Africa. And this meeting was dubbed New Energy, Universal, Debt-Free, and Climate Secure. And so the sessions that ensued in the 3 days actually touched on this topic, also drawing the linkage to SDGs, which also really made the case where Africa is when it comes to energy security and how we have to actually strategically plan our transition. And the gathering also noted that the continent actually contributes very minimally to global carbon emissions, as we all know, just about 4%, but then also that it suffers disproportionately from climate disasters. And given the well-documented failures of COP28 and COP29, we agreed that it was important for us to really come up with a consolidated position as Africans for COP30. And so we came up with what we call the Common Africa Position for COP30. I would highlight a few of what the demands are going to COP30, but then specifically around the energy questions, we left the meeting committing to a transformative energy future for Africa. And we said that this transformative energy future has to be one that is grounded in one, public ownership and control of energy-related assets. That's two, that it has to be grounded in the liberation from the endless cycle of debt and exploitation. And that's lastly, it has to be grounded in South-South cooperation to build climate resilient societies. And so this actually forms the vision of what we consider to be a transformative energy future for Africa. Public ownership at the core of the transformation, liberation from the endless cycle of debt and exploitation, and then lastly, to harness and leverage on South-South cooperation to build climate resilient societies. Now, specifically on the question of reclaim and restore public energy systems, we committed to forging strategic alliances amongst trade unions, civil society, and progressive policy groups around 3 strategic goals. And one, we said, to reaffirm the commitments to UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 7 on universal energy access and clean cooking by 2030. That SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth, and SDG 13 on climate action. As we all know, the SDGs, the cycle is coming to an end soon, and that it's important for us to reaffirm our commitments to these SDG, to these goals. Now, we also said we demand for African governments to reject pro-privatization policies, such as the Mission 300 program, that have been shown to perpetuate energy poverty. And I think it is in this light that we are hosting this webinar today to actually update ourselves on the Mission 300 program, because we also recognize that a lot of us are not abreast with what is actually being touted and pushed by the African Union, as well as African Development Bank and some African governments. And so we are hoping that this webinar would actually also leave us a bit more capacitated on the Mission 300 program, and also help us to now chart a way forward on how we want to actually move forward with advocacy around this. Under Reclaim and Restore, we also said it's important to mobilize support for Reclaim and Restore public pathway alternatives to expand electrification. And then we said neoliberal energy laws must be repealed at all costs. Now, the second area was on ending debt and neocolonial exploitation. And I think if you've been following closely the work around socio-economic issues in ITUC Africa, we are actually really calling for, there's a huge move towards the call for debt cancellations. And we said it is very important to center this in the whole question around climate, specifically because the climate financing architecture currently is only going to leave a lot of African countries more indebted than they already are. And so first of all, we are saying it's important for us to reject an extraction economy that traps Africa at the bottom of the global value chain, and that we need to demand industrial sovereignty, high-value manufacturing of clean technologies in Africa, public investments, that is, governments must use fiscal sovereignty to procure technologies and build public quality public services. I think this has actually also been alluded to by our comrades from public sector, PSI. And so moving on very quickly to our call to action, we left Dar es Salaam with a few things that we said we needed to push. One is to urge unions, communities, and progressive forces worldwide to endorse the declaration that came forward and join our struggle for a debt-free, climate-secure, people-powered Africa. We also said that our campaigns will reclaim Africa's energy and mineral wealth for public good, not private profits. And then lastly, we said together we will block privatization, expose corporate capture, and win the future Africa deserves. And so, comrades, this in brief is the declaration that came forward. And as ITUC Africa, we've been sharing this in the different spaces we've been engaging in after Dar es Salaam. At the African Climate Summit, we made sure we pushed forward some of these demands. Now moving into Belém for COP30, most of these actually also are central or centered in our demands.
1 minute around Belém.
And I'm just rounding up. Most of these are actually also reflected in the demands that we are sending to Belém. And we are calling on all of you, whether you're going to be in Belém or not, to really help us to disseminate and to push widely these demands that we have come up with. We've already shared these, but I think this was a while ago. And so now that we are very close to Belém, we would circulate our demands again to you all. And what we want from you is also for you to disseminate this widely to your media, to your negotiators within your countries, for them to know what our demands are as the Africa Trade Union movement. And we hope that together we would be able to come up with, that Belém would be able to come up with some resolutions that would actually be more in favor of what we have been driving at, and not have, again, what we've seen in Dubai and Azerbaijan. And so, comrades, I would end here and hope that there will be time for us to engage a bit further, and happy to also respond to any questions if there are. Thank you very much, Soraya.
Thanks, Comrade Rhoda. That was helpful. Reclaiming and restore public ownership of energy through movement building. You've taken us through a number of important areas of the declaration, and there's some overlap with what Comrade Daniel raised around anti-privatization struggles. Hopefully in our discussions, we'll find ways to tease out what are the common platforms that allow us to work together going forward. I now want to hand over to Comrade Mavis. Comrade Mavis is the Executive Secretary of the Southern African Trade Union Coordinating Council, known as SATUC. She's going to spend about 10 minutes with us talking about climate change and climate justice. She was also a participant at the Dar es Salaam meeting that Comrade Rhoda spoke about. Welcome, Comrade Mavis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Soraya. To optimize my internet, I think I'll have my video off, if you may permit me. I'll switch it on at the end. And thank you very much, colleagues, comrades, friends. We acknowledge our TUET team, the ITUC Africa and PSI, and all of you who have joined us today. You are all very important in your various roles in the work that we do. And for the benefit of those who do not understand what SATUC is Southern Africa Trade Union Coordination Council. We are based in Gaborone, Botswana, and we represent 23 trade union federations in Southern Africa. And we also work with the global trade union federations like Industrial and PSI. I've been asked to speak about the importance of addressing climate change and climate justice, which is a very important conversation. But I must start with cautioning that we must guard against fighting for a justice that does not include us. I mean, we are being offered a seat at a table, but the menu has already been written. The ingredients are foreign debt, aging technology, and a new form of energy dependency, all served with a green label. This is not justice. This is a climate trap, and it is a trap that we must all come together and fight against. We have heard about the initiative known as Mission 300, led by the World Bank and the African Development Bank, which is presented as a solution. But it is also framed in the language of Western green economies. It pushes a narrow pro-privatization model. And this is a model that is purported to liberate 300 million people. But we all know that it will not liberate the 300 million people that it promises to connect. It will actually indebt them. It will not empower our nations. It will indebt them too. It offers a future that is green for the privileged, but it remains dark for the poor. So while we are addressing the issue of true climate justice, it is also very important to make sure that as Africa, climate justice cannot be separated from energy justice, economic justice, as well as sovereignty. We are often told that we face a false choice of to power our development with the resources that we have and poison our climate, or alternatively, to embrace an imported green agenda and accept permanent underdevelopment. So the question then is, do we accept or reject this choice? It is a choice built on a half-century-old environmental perspective, not on contemporary African realities and contemporary global science. So our moral and economic mission in these discussions should be to lift our people out of poverty, which is why this discussion is very important. How can we do that without reliable, affordable baseload electricity to power our industries, our schools, and our hospitals? An ideology that blocks the use of our own sovereign resources, including coal and gas, while utilizing non-polluting technologies like integrated gasification, combined cycle, and carbon capture, which are being pioneered in the global south, is an ideology of ongoing underdevelopment. It is an injustice. Therefore, this is where our reclaim and restore alternative must be more than just a slogan. It must be a scientifically backed, debt-aware, and pragmatic energy pathway. I mean, as a trade unionist, often our members or workers, ordinary workers, would ask us, if the power station in Morupule in Botswana, for example, closes down, what would happen to our members who are working there, and what would happen to the communities around there? So this then reinforces what Rhoda has already shared, that the Reclaim and Restore framework from Dar es Salaam is our political campus. But we must now also build the vehicle to reach that, of how to reach that goal. We cannot only, comrades, oppose privatization. We must also advocate for a better public alternative that includes a diverse mix of technologies, clean fossil fuels, next generation nuclear, and strategically deployed renewables, all under democratic public control. I know that after I speak, Sean TUET is going to give us a critique of Mission 300. And I'm hoping that after that, we can all now match that, with a bold vision for technological sovereignty. Our public pathway must be a pathway of choice, not just public ownership of a predetermined, limited set of options. And Sandra is also going to be talking to us about our right to focus on women. And, rightly so, because the privatized model of Mission 300, with its full cost recovery, will make electricity a luxury good. It is women who will be pushed back into energy poverty, whose unpaid labor will increase when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. Therefore, a reliable, publicly owned grid is not just infrastructure, comrades. It is a fundamental tool for gender justice. So that is what is the way forward? What is it that we must bring to the table? I think it's very important as trade unions to build the capacity of our own members, the expertise within us. We must undergo an intellectual shift and just go beyond, the traditional collective bargaining that goes in the workplace. We need to build our knowledge and establish research partnerships, as Rhoda has mentioned, with scientific institutions, for example, in India, China, and Brazil, nations which are leading in clean energy technologies relevant to our context. We must secondly also look at initiating a union-led technology audit to evaluate every proposed energy project, not only on cost, but also on its heavy debt burden, its potential for job creation, and its role in delivering genuine 24/7 energy security. I'm looking at the fact that, for example, at SATUC, we do have research centers that we work with. But these are largely research centers that have been looking at issues of labor and employment. And as I mentioned, I think we need to go beyond that and say, how do we also as trade unions contribute to
just a minute, Comrade Mavis.
Yes, other SDGs that support, like other SDGs that align with SDG 8 on decent work. And thirdly, we must be pragmatic. The global auto industry is wisely shifting back to clean combustion as a necessary bridge alongside electric vehicles. We need the same pragmatic approach. Our energy mix must be diverse, advanced, and sustainable. So just to conclude, Comrade Soraya, addressing climate change is not negotiable. I think we all agree with that. But the path we take is what we should consider. Let us not just be critics of a flawed plan. Let us be the architects of a superior future. Let us reclaim our energy systems from private profit. Let us restore our public utilities to their rightful place as engines of development. And let us also redefine climate justice as a future where the lights come on for every African citizen. The air remains clean and our nations stay sovereign, free from the shackles of foreign debt. This is our fight. This is African energy realism, and this is the only climate justice worth pushing for. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Mavis. My apologies for interrupting earlier. I was trying to get people to mute. So I think we're getting the message clearly from PSI Africa, ITUC Africa, SATUC. Your message is clear. There's a common theme that runs across. You're saying basically from Cape to Cairo, from Morocco to Madagascar, we require a reclaim and restore restoration of our public energy system and down to privatization. We will hopefully find a way that pulls some of this together in some joint effort that allows us to work jointly, because the patterns are the same across the continent, with the pressing issue of debt. And I want to hand over, and that was good input by all three centers, and we'll have to pick up some of the issues further in the discussion. I now want to hand over to Comrade Brian Kamanzi, who's a researcher at TUET. He's going to try and frame for us some issues around Mission 300. Over to you, Comrade Brian.
Thank you, Comrade Soraya, and thanks for the previous speakers. Irene, there we go. Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Kamanzi. I'm originally from South Africa. I'm with the TUET team. So I think today, Sean is going to give us a detailed input about Mission 300 specifically. I am going to try and help us move to some of the general discussion we've had now to appreciating more of the very specific context here. And I do want to also say, Comrade Mavis, that for the technology audit, you can sign me up. I'm ready to start tomorrow. So let's take each other seriously. I'm on board. It sounds like a good idea. All right. So the Mission 300 program, which Sean will explain, is primarily dealing with Africans who are not connected to, who do not have access to electricity. Where does that fit in within the broader frame that we are speaking about? When we met in Nairobi, was it three years ago? When we accepted and proposed this notion of the Reclaim and Restore initiative, we were talking about reclaiming the role of public utilities in providing electricity access, resolving energy poverty, and also providing a platform for sustainable industrialization. Now, the piece of that is important for us to understand here is that electricity is a part of energy poverty. It's not the full picture. And within electricity access, obviously, there are energy poverty is again different. There are people who have access to electricity who live in energy poverty because of the neoliberal price policies that we have that essentially prevent electricity from being realized as a right. It is a commodity, and if you cannot pay it, you cannot access it to reproduce to reproduce your life. Now, for those who do not have access, Africa is currently home to 2 out of every 3 people in the world who do not have access to electricity. We'll drill down a little bit into what that looks like for different countries, but that is a significant amount. And within the African continent, 1 in 3 of those people have no access to electricity at all, right? And most of those, the vast majority of those who don't have access to power, I think it's about 70%, who don't have access to power within Africa, that's about 600 million people, are living in rural areas, right? So the 2 groups of people without access to electricity by the stated statistics, which are themselves have many flaws, are mainly rural Africans. And then, of course, those living in peri-urban areas. In many contexts, they would be referred to as townships. Now, of course, there are many issues when looking at SDG 7 alone around universal access, because as was stated by our very first speaker, we're not only looking at simply making sure that everybody has access to electricity, you have a whole range of needs. We are not speaking about a vision in 40 years of solar panels on shacks. We want something more for our people, right? And the grid is very key to that question. In the previous speaker, Comrade Mavis, we heard a lot about generation technologies, and often the debates and the fights are about generation, but actually the grid network, transmission and distribution networks, which are like the highways for electrical energy in your countries, are one of the spheres of this within the sector that are one of the sectors within the economy that receive the least amount of investment. They're also one of the least profitable. And when you have a liberalized electricity system, often the transmission distribution sectors receive. We have observed from quite a number of cases that they struggle to raise investment. So it is a feature, not a bug. Within the African continent, of course, we are shaped by the legacy of colonialism, of also civil war, and of the uneven application of natural rural electrification programs. What we have produced is this map that you see on your right, and a profile essentially from decades of underinvestment and the implementation of structural adjustment programs since the 1970s, is that we have low levels of rural access. This is our starting point. Low levels of rural access, low levels of industrial demand, and because there is a low presence of industries, especially outside South Africa and North Africa, You have demand that is dominated by domestic consumption. So most of the energy that is being produced is by households, and they're mostly in urban areas. So it is uneven. In some countries that are slightly more industrialized, you might have industrial demand playing a bigger role, and that all of that has dynamics around planning and also how one raises money and passes through costs in a liberalized system. So we've had staggeringly low levels of investment in the electricity sector, with specifically poor performance in generation segment for sure, but also the underinvestment in grids has meant high losses. And high losses means that you need even more power on the generating side to send it through your poorly maintained, basically your poorly maintained transport network that is inefficient, that is connected to your citizenry. So next slide. I'll move through the rest fairly quickly so we can get started on Mission 300. Just to give us a sense here, this graph and the next give us a sense of the distribution here of national electrification in Africa. So we see that most countries fall between 0 and 60% electrified, as reported to the World Bank. And those that are closer to 100, between 80 and 100, lie in, again, South Africa and North Africa. Next slide. Of course, now there's 3 important factors for electrification that I want you to keep in your mind that is often not spoken about when we're just talking about how do we electrify Africans, right? There's the quantitative element. So how many people, the number of people who have access. Okay, that's fine. We understand that. The qualitative aspect. So what type of connection is it? Do you have a thin wire connected to your roof, or do you have a solar panel connected to your roof, which allows you to light a lamp in your house and maybe TV for 1 hour, maybe a stove if you're lucky? Or is it that you have a 20 amp connection, which is available 80 to 100% of the year, which can run most modern consumer electronics? It means very different things. And one of the quickest ways that you can see that is, what is the electrical consumption per capita in Africa? And again, we see that despite the distribution we saw on the previous slide, we see that actually there's quite a collection, the number of countries. This is showing the frequency of the number of countries. An overwhelming amount of countries are in the last bucket, using very low amounts of electricity per capita. That's a feature of low levels of industrialization. That's a feature of low quality connections. And then, of course, there's the last piece, which is reliability. Is like how much of time is your network actually down, and are people experiencing outages? That's the third feature. Next slide, and then I'll prepare to hand over to Comrade Sean. Not to oversimplify, of course, but we do have to appreciate that while our needs within the labor movement and within the broader working class movements are diverse, our desires are immense, and we want to transform the living conditions of millions and billions of people. All of that is going to require, and we've discussed in our previous meetings, industrial development is going to play a role. There are benefits to electrification for industrialization in rural areas. So rural electrification plays a role in agrarian transformation policy, rural development and agrarian transformation, and also, of course, in urban areas as well, where there may be particular high-tech industries or industries that benefit from being in densely populated urban areas. They are going to need to consume power, and also they often play a role in supporting economic development. GDP is only one measure; it's an imperfect measure, but we definitely have to appreciate that low levels of electrification for Africa will most likely mean that many countries will remain in a situation where production levels remain low. And that poses a serious risk to the creation of jobs and also to many of the redistributive policies that we hope to realize, because we cannot simply rely on ideas like reparations and external ideas that we have little control over. So transforming our own economies will mean more energy, it will mean more power, it will mean more grid investment, which is not profitable. And we know that many people don't have jobs and can't afford to pay electricity. And so it is relatively straightforward that in order to protect the status of electricity as a right, it will need to be subsidized. We cannot implement a liberalized model And therefore, the question about Mission 300 is not that we disagree with the World Bank about how to raise money. It's we disagree with the whole basket. The entire conception of the plan or the vision that has been set out for Africa is not developed by Africans, and it's definitely not developed for Africans. It's developed for others in their interest. So I hope that sets a little bit of the scene, and then Sean, over to you for some of the specificities of Mission 300. Thank you.
Comrade Sean, you can go.
Yes, thank you, Brian, and thank you to the other comrades who came in. I believe my presentation is available. It's a pretty simple one. I just wanted to frame. Could I get it up on the screen?
Yeah, hold on a second.
Thanks, guys. While we're just getting there, I think hearing the reclaim and restore dimension of the declaration that came out of Dar es Salaam is very important. But I think the question we're all trying to grapple with is like, where do we start with this huge question of effectively confronting the existing policy? Mission 300 is the latest iteration of what is called a pro-market policy, a privatization policy. And I'm going to touch on, and I only have 10 or so minutes, I'm going to try to just give a rapid overview on what is Mission 300, what are governments doing to implement it, what are the chances of success, and how should unions respond? Forget the last bit there. How should unions respond to the governmental support for Mission 300, which is quite significant on paper, but it poses, I think, an opportunity, or presents an opportunity for us to flex our muscles a little bit in this space by confronting the policy, but also proposing reclaim and restore answers to this failed policy. Next slide, please. So really quickly, the Mission 300 is 300 million people to receive access to electricity by 2030, which is just 4 and a bit years from now, and that would halve the number of people without access to electricity, more or less, but that assumes that the population will stay the same, which is not going to be true. So this is the goal. It's pretty ambitious. In fact, it's ridiculously ambitious, and it's not achievable. That would be, I think, our conclusion. Next slide, please. The goal of the main approach, and I don't think this will come as any surprise to anybody, the main approach is to mobilize private finance. And that means offering an enabling environment for the private sector to invest in Africa's electrification process. And also, part of that package is a reform agenda which explicitly calls for utilities, public utilities, to pursue a full cost recovery or cost reflective tariffs position. That may sound somewhat technical for those who are not well versed in electricity policy, but essentially means that if your debt doesn't come down, you won't be an attractive investment avenue for private sector. Private sector is going to want to sell power to the utility, and if the utility is not in a position to purchase the power, the private investment will not come. The dilemma, of course, is pretty obvious, that if you're spending all your time trying to recover your costs of your providing the electricity, paying expensive power purchase agreements, you will have no money left over for electrification. And any electrification you do, as Brian very effectively pointed out, will contribute to the debt of the utility. So you're back to square one. So it means no electrification and no private investment. So this is not money on the table. This is a structural adjustment agenda being pushed by the African Development Bank and the World Bank. And it was kicked off in 2024, and it's moved on since then. Next slide, please. So what are governments doing? Well, they convened earlier this year in Dar es Salaam. We also convened in Dar es Salaam 6 months later, but at their meeting, the heads of state and also Africa energy ministers issued a statement on which was basically supporting Mission 300 at the Africa Energy Summit. And you can see this is one of the clauses in the declaration, which says that the private sector needs to play a central and determinant role. Now, that language is all across the document, and it's in all of the statements coming from the Africa Development Bank and World Bank. It's all about the private sector and mobilizing the private sector. So next slide, please. So there's been two moments worth noting since then. So we're talking, that was February 25. This is June 25 in London. This is the Africa Development Bank leader, who you just saw his picture before. He's recently resigned. I wonder why, but this was in London. Notice on the lectern there, it's a private sector consultation. So again, the whole political thrust of Mission 300 is to go with people like Bloomberg Finance and the Rockefeller Foundation to try to attract private sector interest in the Mission 300 project, which is to invest in Africa's electrification process. So this is again the idea that the process is gaining momentum. This was June in London. Next slide, please. So just last month in New York, there was a big. This was Michael Bloomberg and Bloomberg Foundation hosted a meeting in Climate Week. These are heads of state from Africa and energy ministers. One by one came forward and said that they endorse Mission 300, and Bloomberg and the Bloomberg and Co. were talking about the wonderful investment opportunities in Africa. Of course, I say that very much sarcastically, but this is the rollout, and there's a lot of governments are signing on to this Mission 300 initiative. Next slide, please, Irene. That's great. You won't. This is not. This I thought was quite interesting. The governments who have signed on have been asked by the Africa Development Bank and the philanthropical so-called philanthropy behind the Africa Development Bank to come up with national energy compacts, and 29 countries have submitted these compacts. And this is in fairness, this is a ChatGPT summary that I got yesterday, and it's very interesting. Look at the fourth column on the right. Private sector investment commitments. Nothing. So I asked ChatGPT, where's the private sector money? And they said, well, there's been no publicly released figures. Can you go back, please? So no publicly released figures on private investment. And herein lies the problem, comrades. So what we've got here is a red carpet approach by African governments, backed by the Africa Development Bank and philanthropic organizations and the World Bank, saying you pass a series of neoliberal reforms to make it make profitable investment in the energy sector from private companies. And this is not therefore a privatization agenda. It's a reform agenda designed to attract private investment, but it's basically proposing the breaking up or the dismantling of the capacity of the public utilities to perform electrification and to meet industrial and development needs. So this I think is the core problem of the Mission 300 approach. Next slide, please. And it's summarized here. This is some of the press release around it. This is the president of the DRC, and I've highlighted there. Congo has liberalized the electricity sector. Investors are invited within the framework of Mission 300 to establish themselves and engage in profitable and sustainable business. The New York Times, reporting on the meeting, says the loans from the World Bank and the Africa Development Bank put into place this week are contingent on the regulatory overhauls that in many cases allow for private electricity providers to compete more freely with state-run utilities. So you can see this is green structural adjustment, or structural adjustment without the green in many instances, and you reform, and then maybe the investors will show up. So next slide, please. So what are the chances then of Mission 300 being a success? I will, in my concluding thoughts, just add one thing. The electrification that is being proposed under the Mission 300 is to secure 4 hours of electricity per day for 300 million people. That is not the kind of electrification that the African people need, or the African economic development needs looking forward. So even that goal of 300 million people will not work. And here's why. And I think it's pretty clear. This was the New Deal on Energy for Africa. It was launched in 2016 by the same Africa Development Bank. Its target was 100% urban electrification by 2025 and 95% rural electrification by 2025. 150 gigawatts of new generation capacity by 2025, and 100 and I can't remember anyway. So the main message of this is 10 years ago almost, they launched this initiative, which is almost identical to Mission 300. It completely failed. Rather than acknowledge the failure, what it did was basically launch a new initiative with the same policies, push the target date to 2030 rather than 2025. And what we've got is a recipe for another policy failure that we need to respond to as a movement. Next slide, please. And I think this was the video. I'm just going to, I neglected to put it in the slide, but this was the head of the Africa Development Bank making a 5-minute video. I'm going to send the link in the chat. That was basically saying why the New Deal for Africa was going to be an unqualified success, and everybody should get in on the success of this initiative. Next slide, please. So sticking with that, so the idea was to generate 4 times as much private sector investment than would be provided through mobilized finance by the Africa Development Bank. Next slide, please. So this is the last one. Sorry, you can skip this one. Sorry, Irene. So just to conclude, I think the question becomes, how do we operationalize the reclaim and restore commitment? And is Mission 300 a good place to start? And one of the things I think we should open for discussion, both in this meeting and in the future, is what's the most effective way of responding to this? Is it a joint statement by unions from across the continent, putting forward the problems with Mission 300 and urging governments to distance themselves from a policy which is almost certainly going to fail? Is it to articulate also the reclaim and restore objectives of reclaiming public energy companies, of abandoning full cost recovery criteria, of having grant-based finance, not concessionary loans? We need, I think, to discuss as a movement how to effectively respond to this. Maybe COP30 will provide an opportunity to begin to put our foot in the water on terms of challenging Mission 300. But as of now, it's a fairly blank canvas that we can fill with our positions, our proposals, and put forward a vision for Africa's energy future that is based on fully resourced, adequately financed public utilities to do the job of electrification, and to reconstitute energy planning, and to get rid of the independent power producer programs with their extortionate take or pay contracts. This is widely acknowledged, even in the policy mainstream, to be a policy that is holding back electrification in Africa and sustainable economic development. Sustainable Development Goal 7 100% access, it will not be reached on the basis of these policies. And as a movement, we can strongly articulate an alternative approach called Reclaim and Restore, the public pathway alternative. So I'll stop there. Thank you for your time, comrades. It's been good to be in this conversation.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Sean. That was, thanks, Comrade Sean. That was clear. And you've also helped us both understand Mission 300 and made some suggestions for what we can pick up in discussion. We'll do that. Before I hand over to the last speaker, and then we'll go into discussion, I just wanted to point out that at the meetings we've had in Dar es Salaam, in Asia, in Latin America, there has always been a Women's Forum meeting because it's important to discuss issues of energy poverty, decarbonization, public pathway, debt from a gendered lens. And there's been meetings of trade union leaders in relation to how this affects them. So in line with that process, we've asked Comrade Sandra of PSI, she's the Climate Change Project Coordinator, to spend a few minutes with us despite her heavy workload, to take us through what her thoughts are on how Mission 300 affects women. Over to you, Comrade Sandra, and hopefully around 10 minutes.
Okay. Thanks so much, Soraya, and you will have to interrupt me if I go over 10 minutes or start going over 10 minutes. So thanks to all the previous speakers, and particularly Brian and Sean, for kind of setting the top context for Mission 300 and what it's really about, because that kind of provides the background for what I'm going to talk about. Sorry, I'm just going to stop that noise. So we know that high levels of energy poverty exist in Africa. I think that was spoken about already and very ably. But what I think might not have already been said is that we know that women bear the brunt of this energy poverty. Because women are in the forefront of care work and domestic work, all of this work is made much harder and more time consuming without electricity. Women's possibilities for working outside of the home, for studying, for productive work is also limited because of energy poverty. And so they really are suffering because of energy poverty. Now, we need to challenge the gender role allocations that mean that it's women who mainly suffer because of lack of electricity. But we also need to do something concrete about decreasing this energy poverty so that in the immediate context of now, the lives and position of women is made better. Also, just to note that women's health is often very severely impacted on when they don't have access to electricity. Often women, and particularly in the rural areas where, as was pointed out, there is a lack of electricity, women are burning wood as fuel, and this contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, but it also contributes hugely to health problems such as respiratory and heart diseases, lung cancers, eye irritations, etc., with the result that, and I'm just using a figure from Nigeria, but this is true across Africa, it's estimated that over 98,000 women in Nigeria are dying annually from using firewood. So it's like absolutely clear women are bearing the brunt of energy poverty. So there's a very strong need to reduce energy poverty, to increase access, and reduce women's vulnerability from energy poverty. But, and I think this is also very clear from what Sean was saying, how that access is increased is absolutely important. And Mission 300 is not the way to increase that access. If it's increased with a focus on the private sector, it is not actually going to contribute to reducing energy poverty in any way. And in fact, it's actually going to increase the problem of energy poverty, and so increase the burden on women of lack of access to electricity. So we really do need to reject Mission 300 as a solution, because by making private sector the center of that solution, it worsens the problem. And I'll conclude by talking about the importance of the public pathway for energy, but just to say now that instead of Mission 300, what we actually need is that public pathway for energy. So just to look a little bit more at Mission 300 and the approach that it is taking or not taking to gender issues, it's very clear that a gender perspective and an approach that's really informed by understanding gender dynamics and the unequal position of women in society, the problem of women facing energy poverty is not an approach that is strongly informed how Mission 300 was developed. It's a kind of, they've thrown in a little bit of gender issues, but very much as the surface issues. It's not fundamentally informed how they approach the issue of increasing electricity access. So what does private sector energy, which is what Mission 300 is really punting, what does that mean for women? It's not going to challenge women's economic, political, or social position in society. It's not going to strengthen the position of women. And on what it in fact is going to do is completely undermine and sideline the needs of women. So it's not really looking at how to make sure that the needs of the household, the needs of community, the needs of women are being met in increasing access to electricity. So as Sean was saying, maybe it was Sean or I can't remember, but anyway, often the solution that Mission 300 is pushing is for a very limited connection. So it's a very limited amount of power that households would have access to. Often it's simply enough to charge phones, maybe a light bulb, but it's not enough for things like fridges, for stoves, even for irrigation, for growing vegetables, etc. So in that way, it's actually not helping to improve equity. It's not helping to build equity. It's actually maintaining the status quo. So it's going to create a kind of a tiered energy system with rural and poor communities and households receiving a minimal energy service, while urban and industrial users remain connected to a centralized high-capacity grid. So it also puts a heavy burden on the communities who then become reliant on these mini grids and kind of powered down solutions to maintain and pay for ongoing operations. So it adds an additional burden, financial burden, onto poor and rural households, and it's exactly the opposite of what is really needed. And it really shifts the financial risk and the maintenance burden onto poor households. And this kind of increases equity within society, because this is not something that wealthy or middle-class communities in cities experience. They experience kind of well-run, relatively well-run state provided utility, and that is not being expanded to everybody in the country. So the solutions that are being sort of proposed in terms of mini grids, etc., powered by the private sector, is not going to do anything to provide a structural solution to the problems of lack of electricity for households and for women. And it does nothing to transform the power relations either in the household or in the economy. It's also going to inevitably mean tariff increases. I mean, I've already spoken about the increase in increase in costs because women have to maintain, or households, communities have to maintain the infrastructure of mini grids, of low power solutions. But private sector electricity is also inevitably going to mean that tariffs increase. What this means is that people end up self-disconnecting or simply not connecting in the first place. So maybe your access is increased, but you can't actually use that electricity because you can't actually afford it. So it becomes a form of self-disconnecting. So it's clearly this is not a solution that is actually going to empower women, that's going to increase women's access to electricity, that's going to shift power, gender power dynamics in society, that's going to in any way improve the position of women. But it's also not going to improve the job of women workers. And I think, I want to conclude on this point, because I think that we mustn't forget that as PSI, we represent electricity workers. The number of women who are employed in the electricity sector is relatively low. And often women in the electricity sector are already employed in precarious, temporary, low-paid jobs. And with this kind of Mission 300 proposal, mini grids, private sector coming in, that is only going to get worse. More and more these private companies, they rely on casual, precarious contracts rather than secure employment. So it's really going to disproportionately affect women workers and push more and more women out of sort of permanent employment in the energy sector into informal labor. In addition, as Sean was saying, Mission 300 relies a lot on loans, private finance, very little talk about grants or anything like that. So what does that do? That actually increases country debt. When countries' debt is increased, it often results in more and more intense austerity measures, cutbacks in public service delivery. And what is that going to mean? It's going to mean public service cuts, wage freezes for public sector workers, hiring freezes for public sector workers. And it's often women who face the brunt of that. Women who rely on public services to provide some of the services that they otherwise have to provide in the house, those services are going to be cut. Women are often the first to lose their jobs. Women who are already on low wages cannot afford to have further wage freezes. So it's really going to impact heavily on women workers as well as community workers. So just to conclude, I think rather than empowering public utilities or supporting an integrated national electrification strategy, Mission 300 is going to mean sort of a fragmentation of resources, private firms coming in and benefiting from the commercialization of the problem of electrification. And I think this is very clearly an approach to electrification that we need to reject very strongly and push for a public pathway. I think just to conclude that it's really only a public pathway with strong public utilities that are able to plan, that are able to make sure that the needs of all in the country are met, not just a few wealthy people. It's really important that those utilities are built, because then if you've got proper planning, if you've got a proper idea of what the needs of people are, you can do things like make sure that there's proper lighting for streets, for public transport routes, which would make women safer. It's often, those are the places where women often are the least safe. You can make sure that there's electricity to actually pipe water into homes, to actually effectively treat and then pipe water into homes. And you can make sure that there's electricity for better schools, better and resourced health centers, etc. So, I think very strongly we need, okay, I'm finishing off. We need we need a public pathway. We don't need Mission 300. We need public delivery of electricity rather than private delivery of electricity. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much for that. I want to ask everyone to stay with us, and with your indulgence, if we could just extend our closing by another 10-15 minutes. This is our first discussion on Mission 300 and a number of other issues. It doesn't have to be our last one. I think what's important for discussion is, what do we want to do as African unions? What is possible for us as global centers? I've seen comments in the chat. We'll pick up some of those in the discussion, but I'm hoping I can direct the discussion to what is to be done. And I'll take hands on that for the next 10 or 15 minutes. Comrade Tendai, I think you raise in the chat many important issues around the impact of Mission 300 and women. And if you want to come in on that, I'll give you a minute or so. But I want to direct the discussion, if I'm allowed to, around what is the way forward? What are our responses going to be to Mission 300? Do we want to do what one of the suggestions were, sign a letter as unions? Is that effective? Is it not? Are there unions who can pick this up as campaigns? What? I'll take hands now for comrades who want to enter the discussion. I see Bridget. Bridget, you can go.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Yeah,
Yes, we
my
can.
name is Bridget Mtambo from Zambia, and I was part of the group that was in Dar es Salaam on the same issues that we are talking about. So when I saw this invitation on Mission 300, I just took an interest to just know more about it, and also know the status of my country with regards to this Mission 300. And I also researched and saw that my country, Zambia, is one of the few countries selected to be part of the initial phase of this Mission 300. Of course, this is due to the significant electricity access deficit that we are experiencing. But my major concern, like the previous speaker spoke about, is the issue of the World Bank. I don't know about others, but for me, whenever I see World Bank involvement in anything, all I see is debt, all I see is austerity measures, all I see is salary freezes and job freeze. And I feel this will affect our vulnerable communities and populations that we represent as workers. So in answering to your questions about how we should do and how we should respond to this, I feel there is need for us to go back to the table and find out and also inquire about the endorsement that was made by our governments. How will this affect the workers that we are representing? Because if not checked properly, the campaigns that we are doing on debt and everything will just go to waste. We'll go back to the austerity measures that we are campaigning against. So that is just my concern. We need to get to the bottom of it and really find out what is behind this initiative. Thank you.
Comrade Bridget, before you mute yourself, can you identify your union or organization?
Look, I'm from the Zambia Congress of Trade Unions.
Comrade Bridget.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can. ZCTU. Yeah, I think those of us who are in Dar es Salaam remember who we're speaking to. Thank you for that contribution. I think you are putting up your hand to say ZCTU would want to work on this issue, and we'll have to find ways on how we pick it up with yourselves. Can I have more interventions on what is the possible way forward? Are there comrades who want to follow? Comrade Sekiti of COSATU, you can speak. Comrade Sekiti, unmute yourself, comrade. Comrade Sekiti. Comrade Sekiti, are you speaking? You are muted. Okay. Is there anyone else, whilst Comrade Sekiti is sorting out his sound, his hand is up, is there anyone else who wants to make a... Okay, Comrade Tendai, you may come in.
Thank you very much. I think over time, I must say thank you to TUED for organizing this meeting. I I have the privilege to move in trade union circles at the sector level, at the national level, regional, and sometimes at the global level. And I think that as African trade unionists, it may be in our best interest, especially at the global level, to raise the fact that we are demanding for a public pathway as the route to a just energy transition. There is some resistance, I think, at the global level, especially for unions that organize energy workers in the private sector and so forth and so on. But they also need to be the unions that are demanding for an energy pathway, especially for Africa. And I think this is what makes this discussion very relevant for our continent. Even if we don't look at other continents or global south and global north, we need to speak about what is right, what would be the solution in the global south. When I heard Brian make presentations about the energy poverty gap, we need to give something that addresses this. And I think what has been very clear is that the African Development Bank has told us uncategorically that they're not in it to make the business of ethics and morals. They are in it to make returns on investment. And therefore, that's why for us, a public pathway is very key. And Soraya, I just wanted to emphasize my last point. I think on the gender, it's very interesting. And it's good that we're now talking about women and a just energy transition. And I think I just wanted to emphasize that for our region as well, we must go beyond. I have no problem around demanding clean cooking, clean whatever for women in the household to help them with their care economy. But I think we have feminists in the region. I am a feminist and I must put this out there, that we must also demand transition. I think I agree with Sandra, for women who are workers in these sectors, in the energy sectors, as women who could be producers of energy. And we need to stop seeing them as just as household consumers. And I think this is what we need to be also demanding. What is a holistic demand for women for a just energy transition that is gender sensitive, that empowers women holistically? Thank you.
No, Comrade Tendai, before you go, that is very useful comments. And I think with or without your permission, I think you are being co-opted onto the Tshwed Women's Project. But do you want to make a suggestion, even if it's tentative, on how we take the Mission 300 forward? I see your hand, Comrade Mabu. I'm coming to you. Would there be something you can think of? Should we be doing a statement that whether it's our centers in Africa or unions in Africa, we sign off? Do you think that could work?
I think we should. I think this is important. And I think it's important that within that we contextualize it, that is for our region. I've realized that over time, it makes it a bit more challenging to be called out by other global players that may not agree to these pathways that we are demanding. So to contextualize it to our region, to struggles that women in our region are also facing, not just as women, but even as consumers of energy, people that do not have access to energy. I think this is key. So I agree with you, Salah. Doing very strong position papers would be key, and saying this is our position, even including taking something to Belém as we go forward. I'm worried, especially I've been to the Africa Climate Summit Week. I think many people here have been. And I was very worried to see that a lot of African governments, Tanzania, for example, Kenya, are putting, for instance, clean cooking as the complete answer to gender equality and equity in a just energy transition. And this is not correct. And I think we need to have something very strong that challenges these things. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I think that's useful. We'll follow up with yourself and Comrade Bridget on how we pick this up. Useful comments. Women's roles are not only about care work and making that easier. Comrade Mabu from Satawu, I'm giving you a minute or two to speak. Unmute yourself.
Doesn't.
Yeah. Comrade Mabu, speak. We can hear you. Comrade Mabu, you have muted yourself again. We listening?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Greetings, comrades. Unfortunately, I joined late. I could not join in, but from what I picked up and from the what you are saying towards the end. My view is that the issue of energy poverty, comrades, as the other speaker said, that especially women that are in the impact is larger towards women that are in the rural areas. I think I've shared this with your comrade to say the other day when we were in one of the workshops. I'm coming originally from Limpopo, but I'm based here in Gauteng because I'm working the site. So now in Limpopo, you still have those rural, deeply rural areas whereby there is no electricity. Women are forced to then go to go and look for firewood, and you have situations whereby you find that people are being violated, they are being robbed, they are being raped, some are even being killed in the bushes, because you find an elderly women walking towards the bushes to go and look for firewood alone, because they still have that concept or mentality of saying it's in the rural areas and I'm safe, and you find that things have changed. So this is a very, very serious issue that needs to be addressed across, because now you find that it's only centralized around certain places. Electricity, when they're talking about electricity, you find that they're only focusing, our government is focusing only in the urban areas. There isn't much that has been said on the rural areas. On what can be done in terms of the 300 mission, I think what needs to be done here, we've been talking in many places around the just transition, around climate change and all that. But the problem is, as trade unions, we are still talking and not taking it out there on the streets. That is where our power and the strength lies on, to say, let's take it out, let's unite our cause globally, let's talk regions to regions and agree, have one concept. Because I believe that even the work that we are doing in COSATU Climate Change Committee, we are still talking about the public pathways, we're still talking about involvement of workers, involvement of communities, but our government still continue doing the same thing again, implementing what we are against. So taking it out on the street is because that is where our power lies on. Thank you.
A reminder to
Right.
speakers to please speak slowly for interpretation. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that,
Oh,
Irene.
sorry.
No problem. Didn't want to interrupt you, but we do need to speak slower for interpretation purposes.
You're muted, Soraya.
My apologies. I see two hands up, Comrade Teddy and Kabisa. I'm going to take you now, and I'm hoping you're going to speak on how we take the process of Mission 300 forward. Comrade Mabu, who's from a South African Transport Union, and by the way, Comrade Mabu is a train driver. She's suggesting we need to mobilize for action and use our power. I see a comrade, before I take Teddy and Kabisa, I see a comment from someone called Comrade Rachel in the chat, who says that she is in a position to mobilize resources for us, for our action as we struggle on Mission 300. So Comrade Rachel, I'll take you to maybe, if you want, speak on that. Comrade Teddy, I'll hear you briefly on how we take Mission 300 forward as trade unions.
Good afternoon. Are you able to hear me?
Good afternoon. Yes.
Thank you so much. This is Teddy, the General Secretary for National Union of Catalans and Austerity Employees in Zambia, affiliated to FFTUZ. It is the first time I'm joining this meeting. It's very interesting, and my emphasis is that as we discuss, as we talk, I'd wish now what we discuss to come on the ground and impact our Africa, our nation. I'm challenging all comrades, trade unionists, to come out of bedroom and do the physical campaigns. Thank you.
So, Comrade Teddy, if you and Comrade Bridget of ZCTU, if comrades want us to arrange a virtual meeting for Zambian comrades, the affiliates, the shop stewards, the leadership, we're happy to do something like that. We're happy to pick it up in Zambia first if we're required to. So you and Comrade Bridget can have a discussion and revert back to us. We'll pick it up with you outside this meeting. Thank you for that contribution, and we're happy you joined the meeting. Comrade Khabisa, I'm hoping you're going to try and take us forward on what we need to do around Mission 300.
Thank you very much, Soraya. My view as a way forward is that we really have to do more of sensitization on this issue. Mission 300 appears to be a very new concept. And when the new concept is mooted, in circumstances where we tend to need community support, there has to be much of sensitization. So as a way forward, we have to also factor in community sensitization so that there can be community buy-in, beginning first of all with ourselves in the trade union sector. It's not an easy battle, comrades. It's an uphill battle that we have to wage, because currently the effects of climate change are very, very evident. Like in our country, we've been having challenges of power generation. And it is also clear that most African governments, they do not want to spend more of public resources on certain services. And electricity is one such service. And they seem to be driving citizens into on power generation, mechanisms. So with governments that do not want to direct public expenditure to electricity generation, we have to bear it in mind that our campaign should be a well-informed campaign, that we have to also mobilize the community, because this that you have raised, comrades, is very, very true in that the costs of electricity, when electricity is in private hands, shall be very high and very few afford it. So I propose that in addition to the meeting that you want to suggest, particularly for Zambia, which is very welcome, we also factor in our programming community mobilization and sensitization. Thank you very much.
Comrade Khabisa, before you leave us, you didn't tell us which union you come from in Zambia.
Right. I'm the president of the Federation of Free Trade Unions of Zambia.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us, and that we will rely on your leadership and that of the GS and Comrade Bridget to, outside this meeting, we'll arrange a meeting. It's clear we would be able to do a meeting in Zambia with the leadership of the different affiliates and start there. Thanks for that contribution. I have one more hand up. I do need to start closing the meeting, but I think, Comrade Ernest, I'm going to give you a minute to contribute because you haven't spoken, and then we must pull the meeting to close with some summary of what might be our way forward. Comrade Ernest, you can unmute yourself. Comrade Ernest. Okay. I think there may be difficulties with unmuting. So, comrades, we may not have concluded on what might be the way forward, but we have got several suggestions, or maybe I should say a few suggestions that are concrete. No one has spoken against the drafting of a statement that outlines what. Comrade Ernest, yes, we can hear you. You have a minute because I want to close the meeting, but you may go. Yes.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the participants. I am the General Secretary of the Trade Unions of Burkina Faso. Can I continue?
Yes, please. Comrade Ernest, are you with us?
Okay. Alors, donc,
so,
J'ai suivi avec intérêt
I have followed with interest all the presentations that happened today. I want to ask a very important question. First of all, in terms of the energetic coverage of Africa, where we have 700 million Africans without electricity. And I think this has been a failure because we have been very fast in terms of looking for green energy. All the big countries in the world, they have been industrialized thanks to the fossil energy of the polluting energy. And today, we have overcome this phase, and now we are obliged not to pollute, and we're not big polluters. So Africa should actually reivindicate a percentage of the pollution, because today the big countries have contaminated a lot. They have very high rates, and we only reach 4% of contamination rates. So this phase having finishing, we are starting a new phase. So we want to take 300 million Africans to have energy in 2030. And we know that we need help for that. So the Africans, they are no slaves anymore. They are, in order to have decent work in Africa, with the respect to the right of the workers, I think that the trade unions have to be prepared to demand from that this companies have to be managed by administration councils. It's not difficult to do that. The state, they can actually offer the resources to have electricity for all those millions of Africans. If we think that the private sector will actually boost it, then the private sector needs to be ready for it in those different companies in order to be able to offer guidance, respecting always the rights of the workers in the society.
Okay. I'm really, really sorry, Comrade Ernest, to interrupt you. You were raising very important issues, political issues, of us not allowing ourselves to regress as Africa in relation to these struggles. And I think that with Zambia, comrades from Burkina Faso can also indicate if and the affiliates leadership together, and CHUED would be happy to make a presentation and engage with the comrades. So as I was trying to pull together what might be a possible way forward, we've got on the table the option of drafting a statement that our centers and unions can sign on to. And comrades have correctly pointed out, where we are linked to global centers, we are drafting an Africa position based on our material conditions. We do so in this way. We are also open as CHUED to pulling together country meetings or cross-country meetings where you want further information on Mission 300 and the general issues around a public pathway and reclaiming and restoring energy into public hands and other utilities. We are happy to do so. Please feel free to contact us. You've got our email based on the invitation to this meeting. We really pleased that so many of you stayed with us till so late. And we want to, on behalf of the TUET team, really thank Comrade Daniel, Comrade Rhoda, Comrade Mavis, Comrade Sandra. We know you are all consumed with major meeting preparations, but you have prioritized this issue, and we're hoping you will state the cause with us and the other unions as we forge a way forward on Mission 300. We appreciate the comments that have come through. We've read them. We've not been able to accommodate all of them in our meeting, but we're prepared to run other sessions like this, whether it's a local level or a union level or a in touch. Thank you very much. And we hope you'll join further meetings. I want to close the meeting now and hope we meet before the year ends again. Thank you, comrades.
And thank you to the interpreters.
My apologies for leaving you out in the thank you. Thanks,
beaucoup. Allez, au revoir.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Bye.
Thank
Thank you, beaucoup.
for
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Early meeting. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Comrades, you can disconnect now if you wish, please.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.